Hello, class. Um, Good morning. If you are online, please comment and let me see that you are here. Hello, class. Hello. Good morning. All right, Ogunlade, good morning. Yeah, I think two people are here. Can we have at least 30 people in class? Right. I think you are four in number now. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Yep. Okay, you are 12 in number. Let's have at least 30 people. I think you're about um 60 something in your class. So let's have at least um okay, you are 23 in number. So we are left with at least seven people. If you can have at least 30, we can start. Please call your friends to come online. Call your friends to come online. I'm seeing just 22 people online. So let's have at least 30 people in your class so that we can start. Class governor, please call your people, tell them to come online. All right, I'll be back. All right, yes. I think the number is increasing now. So we have 30 people here. Okay. I can see at least 30 people online. Good morning, class. How are you? So we can start. You can stop commenting for now. So yeah, 34 number. That's a good number to start with. So you can start. You can stop commenting now. Let's start the lecture. I will be as fast as possible so that we'll finish before 10 a.m. because I have another online lecture with a diploma student. So so I want to be as fast as possible with you guys. Today, Dr. Awoleye will send you the assignment. If he hasn't done that, he will send it to you. So the assignment will be a comprehensive one. So it will include his own part and my topics too. So, and that for I'm going to use my part for the CA, like I told you, plus the attendance. So, how you doing? Yeah, this is a neuroanatomy course, and you have to read for you to understand. Yesterday we discussed autonomic nervous system, and I explained to you that autonomic just related to automatic car or something that you cannot control voluntarily. I started with a chart that I drew for you, that we have the central nervous system divided into we have the nervous system divided into central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. And I told you that the central nervous system is majorly made up of the brain and the spinal cord. Why the peripheral nervous system is everything outside the brain and the spinal cord. All right, the peripheral nervous system operates in two divisions: the sensory division and the motor division. And I explained to you that the motor division is it has to do with both somatic and visceral part. Same thing, because the somatic part is skeletal part, the area of the body that is voluntarily controlled. All right. And now we now have the visceral part. So you can call that visceral part the autonomic part, because it is what you cannot control voluntarily. So we have it in smooth muscles, we have it in cardiac muscles, we have it in the GI tract. And I then explained to you that that autonomic part is now further divided into three divisions again, where you have the sympathetic nervous system, you have the parasympathetic nervous system, and you have the enteric nervous system. I told you that the enteric nervous system is just peculiar to the digestive system. All right. So for the sympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic nervous system, they operate in words and opposite. And I told you that majorly, just understand that this parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system needs two neurons: the preganglionic neuron and the postganglionic neuron. Once you understand this, another thing you need to know is that for the sympathetic nervous system, it originates from the thoracic to the lumbar region. So it is called thoracolumbar nervous system too, because it has its origin from the thoracic vertebra to the lumbar vertebra. I told you to know the number from the T1 to L5 or L2 or L3, as the case may be in some individual. And also for the parasympathetic system, it has its origin from the cranial nerves. I mentioned that we have the cranial nerve 1, cranial nerve 3, 7, 9, and 10. And also from this sacrum, it has from S1, S2. So note the way their origin. And I told you that even though they have different origin, the main thing is to eat the target organ. For the sympathetic nervous system, the the this patent nervous system is a bit the pre and the post ganglionic region is longer, so it's not closer to the target organ. But in the parasympathetic nervous system, it is closer to the target organ. In fact, most of the time they are located in the target organ, because it is meant to cause rest and digest. Unlike the sympathetic nervous system, where it's to trigger you to fight or flight. So once you understand it, fight or flight, that's for the sympathetic nervous system. While the parasympathetic nervous system is to make you rest or digest. So you have it reducing your blood pressure, reducing your heart rate, heartbeat, and all that. So please note how it operates. And I told you that the post ganglionic neuron in the parasympathetic system is short, while it is longer. And of course, we have the chemical content that controls its this transmission, which is what we call neurotransmitter. All right. So please, I told you about acetylcholine and I told you about non-epinephrine. Read and adrenaline, all of those neurotransmitters. Go and read about them. And of course, the clinical correlate as they relate to pharmacy, pharmacology, and all that. Read them up. That's a general recap of what I taught you yesterday. Are we together, class? Are we together? Can I see you? Say yes. Are we together? Can I go ahead and start the lecture proper for today? If you are together, oh, great, great. So that's good. So you can stop commenting now, concentrate. Today we are going to I'm going to do a combined lecture for both embryology and the genetic. All right, embryology and genetics in nervous system. So, but for the embryology, I'm going to just brush over, so you have it as more as an assignment. But so I want you to do a thorough reading, because you have to understand it. Because many of the things that we see in the society today, this course is so interesting, because you see a lot of people, patients in the hospital. You see children having Down syndrome, anencephaly, etc., etc. And you imagine what is the reason for this. It is because of what happens, all right, during development. So you can pick your lecture note now. Let's start. I'm going to also be sharing the screen. I wasn't able to convert this to PowerPoint. I told you it's just bear with me now. I'm on mat leave, so I have a lot to attend to. So, but we will still use the lecture note that I sent to you. Um, so let me share the screen so that we can continue. All right. So at the end of this class, you must, if you don't know it now, by the time you do your assignment, you must be able to know what neuroembryology entails. You must know granulation. You At the same time, you must know granulation, like I mentioned, which is simply the division of the bilaminar embryo into the trilaminar embryo. Basically, the way the three layers are formed, three germ layers, which give rise to the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. And of course, you have to know that the ectoderm is what forms the nervous system. The ectoderm, the outer part of the germinal disc, the germ layer. I told you that you have to understand granulation. When you understand, let's start from the root. Immediately fertilization occur and the zygote is formed. There are different um rapid development that occurs. But at the point where the implantation has occurred in the womb or in the uterus, let's use the medical term now. Implantation, which occurs between the fifth to the seventh day, as soon as the zygote is implanted into the uterus, there is a process called granulation. So granulation is simply the division of the bilaminar embryo into trilaminar embryo to three. So you have it divided into three germ layers. The zygote divides to three germ layers. So you have the embryo, you have it as the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. So, and I emphasize that the ectoderm give rise to the nervous system, and of course the epidermis, the outer layer. So understand that. Once you understand all the stages involved, it's going to help you to know what neuroembryology is all about. So you are going to do a comprehensive assignment on granulation. Another thing that is important for you to also understand is neuronation. Neuronation is the process by which the neural plate forms the neural tube. And of course, it has different stages. It has about five. So I said that is a process by which the neural plate give rise, forms the neural tube. This neural tube is what eventually develop into the brain, and of course you have also the spinal cord, all the central nervous system. That's what give rise to it. So, and it had different stages: the neural plate formation, the neural groove development, neural fold elevation, the fusion of the neural fold, and of course the last stage, which is the formation of the neural tube. So I'm giving you two assignments now that you have to write on. You write on grassonation, and of course you also write on neuronation. Once you understand these two processes, you get to understand what neuroembryology is all about, how the brain is formed, how the spinal cord is also formed. All right. So let's go to the development of this nervous system. Like I told you that the neural plates give rise to or form the neural tube in neuronation. So the neural tube develop into the brain and the spinal cord, like I said earlier. And also, initially, the primary brain vesicles appear. And these primary vesicles, you must have heard probably while reading, you must have seen proencephalon, mesencephalon. So the proencephalon give rises to the forebrain. All right. The mesencephalon give rises to um the midbrain in the adult. Eventually, when the in adults you have it as the midbrain, and the rhomboencephalon give rise to the hindbrain. So you have the three now, and what they give rise to in the adults. All right. Also, we have the second brain vesicle. There are about five. We have the telencephalon, the diencephalon, mesencephalon, metencephalon, and myelencephalon. Each of these secondary vesicles give rise to different structures in the adult. For instance, the telencephalon give rise to the cerebral hemisphere. All right, you must have by the time you study, you see that the brain has different layer. We have the different layer in the brain. We have the cerebral cortex, we have the cerebellum, you have the hypothalamus, you have the thalamus, you have the midbrain, you have the different layers in the from the frontal part of the brain. The cerebral cortex takes the larger part of the brain. You have the cerebellum behind, you have the thalamus, you have the midbrain, you have the hypothalamus. All right, you have pituitary gland, different parts of the brain. So they have their origin. So from the secondary vesicles, the telencephalon give rise to the cerebral hemisphere, the anencephalus give rise to the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. All right. So while you are preparing for your exam, you must know the origin of each of these parts of the brain, and where they have it from, what they develop to in the adult. So once you understand, okay, the cerebral hemisphere is from the telencephalon. All right, the diencephalon give rise to the hypothalamus, the thalamus, and epithalamus. All right, and of course the mesencephalon. Mens means middle. All right, once you have, anytime in anatomy when you hear mess or meso, all right, it has to do with middle part. All right, so we have the mesencephalon giving rise to the midbrain. You have the encephalon giving rise to the pons and the cerebellum, and of course the last part is the encephalon, which give rise to the medulla oblongata in adults. All right, so let's go to the brain vesicles. Like I was explaining, I've talked about the primary brain vesicles, and we've talked about the secondary vesicles. Look at the chart, the way it gives rise to different um encephalon give rise to different derivatives in adults. All right. The telencephalus give rise to the cerebral cortex, the basal nuclei, the hippocampus, the olfactory bulb, and the lateral vesicles, like I told you also. And the diencephalus give rise to the aside the epithalamus, hypothalamus, and the thalamus. It gives rise to the retina. You know, there is a connection between um, the eye. In fact, the eye, the nose, they are so connected to the brain. Okay, so you also have some parts of this the eye, the sensory organs that connect, that have their origin from, they are being derived from this diencephalus. So aside the diencephalus giving rise to the thalamus, hypothalamus, and epithalamus, you also have some sensory organs having their part developed from the diencephalus. For instance, you have the retina of the eye, you have the optic nerve also for the eye, and of course you have the posterior pituitary. I think I mentioned that also. The pituitary gland has two parts. We have the anterior pituitary gland and the posterior pituitary gland. So the anterior part of the pituitary gland also, it originated from the diencephalon. And also you have the third ventricle. We also have the development of the midbrain. I told you the other time that we have it from the main encephalon, middle. All right. So the midbrain eventually forms the cerebral pedicles. It also forms the tetus, the cranial nerves. I told you how important these cranial nerves are. We have about 10 of them. If you are serious, by now you should have known the 10 cranial nerves that we have. So we have the cranial nerves, and also which are majorly the cranial nerve 3 and cranial nerve 4, and also different organs. So the next one is the development after the midbrain. We have the hindbrain, which is formed from the encephalon. The remember the change in pronunciation, not mens encephalon. Mens encephalon is from is from the middle brain, while the encephalon from the eye brain. All right, it gives rise to the pons and the cerebellum of the brain. Okay, and of course the last part of the brain, which is the encephalon, forms the medulla oblongata. So let me ask a question before I continue. Which ventricle, or which part of the brain forms the cerebral hemisphere? Can you type which part forms the cerebral hemisphere? Type the answer. Let me see that you are getting it. Which part of the brain? Don't look at your notes. Which part of the brain forms the cerebral hemisphere? I'm not seeing comments. Please comment. Let me see your comments. Which part of the brain forms the cerebral hemisphere? Comment the answer. Let me see that you are together. Which part um, of the encephalon forms the cerebral hemisphere? You got it wrong. Oh. Cerebral hemisphere. Which part of the brain? Mesencephalon does not form the cerebral hemisphere. I've told you that mesencephalon forms the midbrain, mid. So I've not seen anybody that got it oh, among the people that I'm 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 waiting. Please let me see your response. Which part of the brain forms the cerebral hemisphere? Good. Yes, thank you. You got the answer right. Good, 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 good. That's a great one. The telencephalon. Good, good. So you that wrote mesencephalon, it means that you are not following the class. So please, after now, make sure you read so that you get. All right, good. Everybody, at least, like, it's just one person that didn't get it. Well, okay, about, oh no, 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 you're about maybe 3 or 4 people that didn't get it. Oh, those of you that wrote metencephalon, somebody wrote no, 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 it's telencephalon. It's telencephalon. Telencephalon forms the cerebral hemisphere. So after this class, please go and study the origin, the derived and the adult derived study the origin and the derivatives, please, after this class. Okay. And let's quickly go to the development of the spinal cord. All right, the caudal neural tube becomes the spinal cord. Remember, I told you that in neuronation, the neural plates give rise to the neural tube, and the neural tube now divides to different form where you have the encephalon, the vesicles. So let's now we talk about the spinal cord development, and see the neural tube that differentiates it into different zones and layers. So we have the ventricular zone, the mantle zone, and the marginal layer. So the ventricular zone produces the neuroepithelial cells, and the mantle layer give rise to form the gray matter and the white matter. All right, majorly in the brain and in the spinal cord, we have two layers. In the brain, I don't think your course entails the histology part. If this is not part of the course content, but let me just chip it in. We have in histology of the brain. By the time you view the brain under microscope, you're going to see the brain and the spinal cord. Majorly, you see two layers: the white matter and the gray matter. In the brain, you have the white matter in the inner layer and the gray matter in the outer layer. All right, but in the medulla, in the spinal cord, is the other way around. You have the gray matter in the inner layer, and then you have the white matter in the outer layer. All right, those are the two layers that you find in the brain and the spinal cord. So the mantle layer of the neural tube give rises to um the gray matter in the spinal cord, while the marginal layer give rises to form the white matter in the spinal cord. I hope that is clear. So let's also look at the basal plate. The basal plate also, which is located um ventrally, that is in the front. When you hear ventral, it means at the frontal part of anything. When you have dorsal, there are two times that you need to understand in anatomy. We have the frontal, ventral, or dorsal. So ventral means it is the upper part, or all right, while or frontal part, but dorsal mean it is at the back, behind. So the basal plate, which is located at the ventral part, develop into motor neurons and the ventral neurons. Remember, majorly, yesterday I told you that the autonomic nervous system operates in both the motor neuron and in the sensory neuron. So the motor neuron is formed from the basal plate of the neural tube. All right, and we also have the anal plate, which develop dorsally. I've explained to you, when you hear dorsal, it means behind, at the back. So, and the dorsal, the anal plate, which is located behind uh, the neural tube, develop into the sensory neuron and the uh, dorsal horn. So I should ask you now, which part of the plate give rises, or let me just ask directly, the basal plate give rises to the sensory neurons, true or false? The basal plate give rises to the sensory neuron, true or false? The basal plate give rises to the sensory neuron, true or false? Good, good. So you know that it is the alar plate that give rises to the sensory neuron, while the basal plate give rises to the motor neuron. Yeah, so these are the questions that you need to um, get familiar with. These are some of the questions that you will see in your exam. All right, great. So you can pause. Let's continue the class. Stop commenting. Let's continue the class. Okay, so we also have the major thing that separates the anal plate, and the major structure that separate the anal plate and the basal plate, which is called the sulcus limitans. The sulcus limiter is the structure that separates the anal plate from the basal plate. Alright, so this separation persists into adult. In adult spinal cord, the separation persists so in the organization. That's why you have like I told you, we have different layers. Plus you have the gray layer and the white matter. So this separation, which is caused by the sulcus limitans, persists to adult spinal cord organization. So the development of the peripheral nervous system, like I told you that we have the central, I've just mentioned for the central nervous system now. So let's talk about the peripheral nervous system. And of course, you know that the peripheral nervous system is what eventually give rise to the autonomic nervous system that we discussed yesterday. Just the same thing, we have the um, this 1 minute. Hello, class. Please give me just 1 minute. I'm coming. Hello, class. Sorry for the break in transmission, please. I'm back. I hope you are still here. Hello. Are you still here? Sorry, I needed to attend to something. So I hope you are here. Great, great, great. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we can continue now. All right. So I told you that yesterday we treated the autonomic nervous system, and also we've talked about how we have the development of the brain and the spinal cord. So now we want to talk about the development of the peripheral nervous system. All right, how it is formed. So this is what will form the major parts of your assignment. So the assignment is the development. Write a comprehensive note on the development of the peripheral nervous system. A comprehensive note. I think class governor, as Dr. Awolaye sent you the question, please answer me. Richard, as Dr. Awolaye sent you the question, let me chat. Dr. Awole, no. So that would be the assignment, a comprehensive. So that will be your assignment. I've sent it to him, so he will include it in the assignment that he will include it in the assignment. So write, discuss the development of the peripheral nervous system. So that's what you'll be writing on. So I don't want you to copy my notes. Go and write an excessive comprehensive study on it. So from there, we move to genetics. I'm not going to do much. Just go and I think I've given you the background knowledge that you need to know how the neural plates develop into the neural tube. So and then from there you go and know how you get the neural crest cells, how you get the cranial nerves, the spinal nerve, the peripheral ganglion, and of course the autonomic nervous system. They still have their origin from the, I explained the encephalon, so the telecephalon, the diencephalon. So go and look at them extensively and write a comprehensive note on the development of the peripheral nervous system. All right. So I want to mention the congenital anomalies too. So please, you are going to write on the congenital anomalies of of the nervous system. Let me include that so that um let me include that. All right, so I've said them. So you have to know these congenital anomalies and their features, the characteristics, what you see in anencephaly. You see most of these anomalies in the hospitals. All right, you see them, the anencephaly, spinal bifida, when there is a failure of the closure of the neuro of the caudal and neuropulse. It's so sad, many of these. So please go and read. If you don't, normally we are supposed to, had it been have my slide, yeah, I'm supposed to show you all these the pictures. So please write them. I won't say you should draw, but go and write a comprehensive or a short note on the um congenital anomalies. All right, you can go to the library, yeah, go to the medical library in college so that you see the neuroanatomy textbook and then look at the pictures of all of these anomalies. Is essential so that it will help you in your exam. Okay, so do that assignment and then we brush over to genetics of the nervous system. You know that genetics is just a branch of biology that has to do with the study of heredity and variations. And of course, the major content that we study in neurogenetics is the gene, the DNA, because you have the gene in the DNA. You know the full meaning of the DNA, deoxyribonucleic nucleic acid. So the DNA has a way to determine what you have in the brain, in the spinal cord, or in general in the nervous system. So neurogenetics is the study of how the gene influence the development, the structure, the function, and the diseases of the nervous system. So, for instance, the other time I told you about the anomalies that we have in the nervous system, and I mentioned that those anomalies, one of the things that cause them is the variation in the gene, all right, in the DNA. So you have to know how this gene, how it works, and of course, the same thing, the variations that we have also in the genes. Um, it is important for us to know this. The nervous system develops through the coordination action of numerous genes that regulate the proliferation. You know, the other time I was saying, oh, this one give rises to this one give rises to this. So it is the action of the genes that you know that give rises to all of that, regulates what the part of this particular neural tube that give rises to this. So it is important for you to know how this gene work. So the neurogenetics help us understand the development of the brain, the congenital neural development, and also neurodegenerative disease like Parkinson disease, and also neurodevelopmental disorders like about the anomalies now, and also drug responses, especially as it relates to you, pharmacy student. So the hereditary material, which is the DNA that is found in almost all the cells, it functions in the storage of genetic information. That's why you see that when people give birth, they say, oh, let's go and do the DNA. We want to get the genetic information. And also the DNA also function in protein synthesis, and of course in transfer of hereditary trait. So the genes regulate the cell growth, it regulates, and of course anytime you hear neural, it has to do with the brain. It also regulates the differentiation of the neural tube. And also, if the neural tube is not well differentiated, of course there will be issues. And this can also affect the formation of the brain. It can affect the formation of the peripheral nervous system, of the formation of the spinal cord, etc., etc. So let's mention the chromosome. You know that the human body has about 46 chromosome, 22 pair each, and of course it has one pair of sex chromosome, which determines if somebody is a male or a female, where you XS chromosome or you have XY chromosome. um so we also have another thing that you need to know is the gene expression in neural development. Yes, very important. The neural development depends on tightly controlled gene expression. So this gene expression processes neural induction. I told you the other time that you should read neuronation and gastrination. Gastrination where you have that division, and also neuronation where you have the neural tube giving neural plate giving rise to the neural tube. So it is important because the gene expression during development as is also it controls these stages that I mentioned earlier. So you have the major stages, the neural induction, you have the neuronation, you have the migration of the cell, and also you have synaptogenesis. Yesterday I mentioned that the pre-ganglionic neuron synapses with the post-ganglionic neuron. The synapse is just the communication between neurons. You have it. We have millions of neurons in the brain. So the formation of synapses depends on the neuresis, it depends on the neuroneges, it depends on the cell adhesion molecule. So also yesterday I mentioned myelin. I mentioned when I was describing the pre-ganglionic neuron and the post-ganglionic neuron that okay, one is myelinated, one is not myelinated. So the gene regulates the oligodendrocytes. All right, we have different cells in the brain. We have go and read up the function of the oligodendrocyte, the function of the squam cells, all right, in the peripheral nervous system. So the myelin, the gene regulates myelinations. One, it tells, oh, the part of the brain that's supposed to have the myelin sheath, the part of the neurons also, rather, the part of the neuron that's supposed to have myelin sheath, the part of the neuron that's supposed not to have myelin sheath. The neuron, just that I'm not in class. I don't know if my marker is working now. Okay, let me draw. I hope you can see me. Let me draw how the neuron is. The neuron, the neuron is like this. You have the cell body, all right. Then you have the axon, then you have the dendrite. Okay, the axon is a longer form of the dendrite. So you have different neurons. There are some that are unipolar, there are some that are bipolar. Okay, so you have different neurons in the body, in the brain, millions of them. So the way they communicate matters. All right, the communication is majorly by the synapse that you have between them. So once there is um um an issue with one cell or the other, based on the genetical operation, it affects how the brain eventually forms, or even the communications between the brain. So it is important for us to know the important developmental genes in the brain. So please read up that part. The developmental genes that we have in the brain, you have the SHH, um the PAS gene, the HOX gene, the source gene, their function. Go and read up all of these genes. And they are, for instance, now the SOX gene regulate the neural stem cell main also the brain development. The notch signaling functions in cell uh, main cell fate determination, and neurogenesis. All of these are important in the um development of the brain and the central nervous system eventually. All right, the neural crest also, the cells, I mentioned the other time that you should know we have different cells in the brain. You have all different supporting cells. The neuron is a nerve cell. That's a major cell that you have in the brain. But we also have some supporting cells in the brain. Like I mentioned the other time, I mentioned the oligodendrocyte, the swarm cells. All right. We have the different cells, the melanocyte, all of those cells that they support and they function well with the coordination of the brain. So the neural crest genesis, you have to know the neural crest cells that form different cells that we have in the brain. Okay, and of course yesterday I mentioned the adrenal medulla, which secretes the adrenaline, which is very important in the autonomic nervous system. There is a very important neurotransmitter, so it has the derivative from the neural crest cells. Okay, so brain development proceed through proliferations. Cell proliferation is like cell divisions. When you have different divisions in the cell migration, cell differentiation, synapse cell formation, and circuit refinement. These are the major major processes that happens in, and it is being controlled by the genetics. Cell proliferation, immediately there is fertilization in the embryo. In the we're talking of immediately the sperm and the ovum meet, and there is fertilization. Proliferation starts immediately. So, and migration start to form different discs. I mentioned granulation, when you have three layers, from the embryo, to the zygote, to different